I'm going to show you something that the weekly chart has never done before, and then I'm going to show you why the daily and the weekly chart, if they were two dudes running from a bear, the daily chart is the one out in front running real fast, looks behind, sees his friend sitting there tying the shoe as the bear is getting close, and the daily chart is looking back, still running, saying, hey, come on, man, we got to outrun this bear. And let me show you what I mean. However, I know that I need to have a moderately bullish bias, so let's dive into the charts and analyze this. You ready? You better be. Let's go. You are staring at nearly all of Bitcoin price history. This is the weekly chart. The red line is the weekly 10 EMA. The yellow line is the weekly 21 exponential moving average EMA. When the red crosses below yellow, it's generally very bad. When the red crosses above the yellow, so above, then it's generally very good, leads to years-long moves, right? There have been 2 times in Bitcoin history where you got 2 down crosses. So where it crossed down, recovered, crossed down again. You've had it happen twice in Bitcoin history. Both times it was not that great. And it seems to be happening again right now, unfortunately, with a little bit different flavor. So these 2s marked where it crossed down a second time. Each of these second times, it was below the previous cross down. However, this time it's above, but it's still a second potential cross down. So if you can view it as, it doesn't matter the height of 1 versus 2, it just matters that it happens twice in a row. If somebody were interpreted that way, that would be pretty bad. However, the weekly trend is up. The daily trend is in a no trend, but leaning up. You have to have a bullish bias. So let's take a look at this real quick. As these arrows are pointing, we're going to look at what price was doing on the weekly candles, and then we'll see what it's doing right here as the red is getting close to crossing the yellow. We'll zoom in to show you. So the red is getting ready to cross that yellow. Not good, right? It's getting very close. So we're going to see what's going on. So let me put price back on. Candles closed and consolidated. So closed and consolidated below the 21 EMA, specifically while the red is on top. Okay, so under that condition, the red is on top, but price is closing and consolidating a little bit under the yellow. In addition to that, price just got rejected from the 21 as it was trying to come up. So that's the scenario. Red on top of yellow. It didn't just come here and tank, right? Which would still be red on top of yellow. So you've closed and consolidated red on top of yellow. All right. And then you got a rejection here. So let's take a look at all these other arrows. And it just stayed down here until it crossed, and then it went lower. So that's not quite the same. All right, let's take another look. Red on top of yellow, but price was on top. So it just tanked past, so that's not the same. Another one over here. This is actually the closest like fractal of a weekly trying to undo this red-yellow cross. This is as close as it gets. So it came down, red is still on top of yellow, it consolidated, but price closed above, and it was still bad. Right? It was still not good. It still didn't work out, but price did in fact close above on that first attempt to touch that yellow line, right? So this is very close. So our last week is similar to this, but ours closed below, it got past the yellow line, then came back down and closed under it. Price came below, and it never consolidated down here while the red was on top. It only had 2 closing candles below, then the third went right back up and closed above the yellow line, and then above the red line, and then it ultimately ended up failing. So that's not the same. 2 arrows left. Red above the yellow, but price only closed 1 week below the yellow. So that's not the same, because currently we have multiple weeks closing below the yellow line. Here, similar idea, red on top of yellow, only 1 week closed below. So this green candle opened below, but it closed above. So this is the only time in Bitcoin history this has happened. However, there has been one case that was very similar back in early 2020 right there. It is a fairly similar case. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to analyze, okay, what does this mean? But let's look at the daily, and then I'm also going to show you why, when you make this analysis, why you need a slightly bullish bias within here, all right? Because the weekly is in an uptrend, the daily is undoing a downtrend, currently in a no trend, and we're going to try to make sense of that. But the daily is looking really good right now, and the weekly is looking like hesitation. So the weekly is the chart back there getting chased by a bear who's tying his shoes, while the daily is trying to race, but he might have to go back and get his friend. And if we do that, we're going to have a small downturn if that happens. But if the daily chart says, screw him, I'm just racing ahead, well, then maybe the daily chart will save the day and keep charging up. So that's what we're going to look at next.
Flip your phones or get flipped off, hit the like button, take your finger, wind it up, or do the crawl dance if you want, and then hit that like button without breaking your phone in excitement.
Leave a comment down below, or Bitcoin continues being slow. Just leave a random comment for the algo. Those things are for me. Here's what's for you. Make sure that you've hit that bell and that you're subscribed, because the bell allows me to deliver more time-sensitive information to you. All right, now we're going to go see if we think the daily's just going to take off without his weekly friend, or if he's going to go back for him. Follow me on Twitter at @CostasVerdes2. Turn on your microphone and camera and ask me questions directly and live. Links to the Discord community in the description section. You don't want to commit to an online community, but you do want extra and exclusive content? Check out the information that pops up after you hit the join button under this YouTube video. This is Bitcoin on the daily chart. Here was your recent local low. I do not think this was enough of a correction to constitute a local low for the daily chart. It was close, but I don't think it's quite good enough. This, however, with 1-2 candles having their bodies lower and lower with a 1-2 candle correction and a small green candle just chilling here, I believe that this will be constituted as a higher low than this and your first higher low if today's daily candle can close green and the next candle starts off green as well. What would undo this as a strong candidate for a higher low is if today had a weak closing, closed back down here, and then kept going lower. So this was a local high. You have a higher local high, but you can check that, but you don't have a higher local low yet. So therefore the daily is in a no trend, but it seems to be in an uptrend on the time frames just under that. For example, the 12-hour chart. This is a definite higher low. This is a definite higher low. Higher highs and higher lows on one time frame down, the 12-hour. That means the daily looks very, very ready to form into an uptrend. So it looks ready to go. So this is the friend that is running really fast from that bear, says, hey, let's giddy up. But here's what's going on in the weekly. Check this out. So I have drawn in, see this yellow line here? I have drawn that in. That is where the weekly 21 is. So I've overlaid it. Now I'm going to go down to the hourly chart and we're going to see Bitcoin's interaction with that. It's having a lot of hesitation. A lot of hesitation. It almost looks like the weekly is holding back the daily. And let me tell you this. The daily is having a bullish cross on its EMA, so the daily chart does. And this weekly stuff that we're seeing here with these EMAs, it seems to be holding it back. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second, what I mean that the Bitcoin daily says, oh, we're just getting started. Let's ride up. And all of that could make us think, wait, maybe it is the weekly chart that is causing the indecision here, or it might be the end of year close as well. We have a yearly candle closing in 4 days here. So let's check this out. So you can see this hesitation coming up to the weekly 21, just can't get above. It got rejected and now it got above and it's coming back down below. So that is a form of hesitation. And you saw in the other examples when I had it on the weekly chart with the blue arrows, once Bitcoin got above the L line, it just flew above, right? Okay, so now let's go to the daily chart and then I will put on 2 EMAs, the red and the yellow, which is the 10 and 21. You have a bullish cross getting ready to happen. See how these cross to the upside? And you got a big move thereafter. So take a look. Now let's put price back on. So when did the move really pick up? The move started picking way up after Bitcoin's made a charge above the yellow line. See how this candle was the big candle that got it all started? It was the charge above the yellow line. So let's take a look at what's happening now. It's a very common play. You had a charge above the yellow line. It hasn't quite crossed yet. And you had a nice retest of it. And now it's getting blocked by this yellow line here, which is the weekly 21. So it looks like the daily really wants to get above here and play out this bullish cross. And it looks like it has a lot of room to go. I'm talking 53 to 58K, something perhaps even as big as 60. But the weekly seems to be kind of locking it in place for whatever reason. So this is a very fresh candle. It is less than 24 hours old. This is a weekly candle. It just started today. I would have had a much more bullish bias had this week closed above, but it came up. And as you saw on the 1 hour chart, it got rejected from it extremely finely. I mean, a very fine. So now I'm on the hourly chart. Check that out. It was a very obvious rejection. So take a look. Hour chart couldn't get above, rejected, driven down, right? So when the market is a little indecisive like this, but has a bullish bias, here's what I like to do. I like to say, okay, where should my bias be? Bullish? Okay, I will trade in that direction. But then specifically, I need to know at what exact moment I bail on that plan. And the idea that we're a little indecisive right now means I need to have that in the forefront of my mind. It needs to be very present when I'm trading to the upside, regardless of how bullish I am. The chart is saying you need to have a mildly or moderate bullish bias, but you should also know exactly when you should change that bias. So let's take a look at when that'll be. Because this is a fresh week, I would say if price at any moment gets below the open of this candle, which means this candle flips red, I would say that's the moment I get my guard up and I'm neither bullish nor bearish. I'm moderately bullish. And at that moment, I need to be flat with my bias and perhaps be in a no trade territory. So this candle opened at 50,855. So let's go to a lower time frame and let's mark that off. Bam. Now I can zoom into these smaller time frames and be more nimble. If I see not even a closure is needed, if price simply gets below there, even for a minute, I'm not going to be bullish anymore because the week just flipped red after a rejection of the 21. Is that making sense of why and the logic behind it? Now let's see if this line that I just drew in, let's see if it aligns with anything else. Well, it roughly aligns with this whole structure's high. So if price breaks back below there and the weekly momentum does indeed turn red, well, then you're probably going to test the middle of this structure back down in around 48K. If that line breaks, your target would be somewhere in the middle. Let's put it somewhere like here and just call it roughly 48,000 bucks. I will make that a red target. And this blue line seems to align with a previous price point that was already rechecked with this little flash crash here. All this hesitation and this move up was at this blue line. You had a major rejection from this line during the last bump up after Wyckoff from 29K when Bitcoin went straight to 52. It was the top of this structure. So if price starts going below the top of this structure where you had this exact rejection point, all this little hesitation, this exact retest, and the point which you could consider the top of this structure, then your next target down is going to be roughly 48K. I'm on the daily chart. It means that this candidate for a higher low will convert itself into a higher high. If price goes something like this, comes down here and closes the day up there, well then, and let's say it recovers from that point, well then you have a higher high and a higher low. And if you get recovery, the daily is then fully in an uptrend because right now it's in a no trend. And all of that would lead to the new year. And do you remember my last YouTube Bitcoin video where I was talking about the gravestone doji on the 3-month chart? So if that were to happen, the larger time frames wouldn't be sitting that hot because this quarterly candle right here would be a gravestone doji near the top of a run. That's not good. And the monthly candle, per that last video, would close right at just barely above the monthly 10, which would be interpreted as falling into the monthly 10, which the next month could easily be red. I can see how important that 50,850 line is because it could create a chain reaction for the higher time frames to need to test down lower. It could easily be the stimulus to make January a red month. So let's run through this one more time, how this can be a chain reaction. Watch. You had a rejection from the 21. If this week then flips red, then the momentum of the week will be down. And that would be below this blue line. Now let's flip down to the daily. If this line is lost, the next point that will likely be retested will be around 48,400. And that would all take us to Happy New Year. Then the next quarterly candle starts and the next monthly candle starts. So now you have to look at how those would close if this would happen. 3-month candle or the quarterly candle would be a gravestone candle, which is not good. A monthly candle would close closer to this red line, which means this wick won't be as long. And so with this long wick right now, it's interpreted as pretty good. I think this wick says repulsion force up and buyers are really stepping in. But if price closes closer to about here, that means it's still falling in because now the wick isn't as long and the buyers they couldn't hold that up, right? Can you see this long wick here? The buyers are holding this up. They're pushing up, pushing up, pushing up. It came below it and the buyers push it up. But if it closes back down here somewhere, that means the sellers are winning and price is falling into that, which means the next month, January, which would fit in this slot, has a stronger likelihood of coming back down and getting closer to checking this line down here. And that's in the 38Ks. And all of this would happen if price, even for a couple minutes, goes below this week's open, which is about 50,850. It could cause a chain reaction that could last a whole month, the month of January. And although that sounds mildly bearish, the important thing is, though, right now, the charts are also saying right now you have a reason to be moderately bullish. Weekly's in the uptrend, daily is this close to being in an uptrend, and it's really starting to race. The 12-hour has a very strong set of higher highs and higher lows, but it's just that one line at 50,850 that could change it all in a chain reaction. So make sure you write that line on your chart, and then you can zoom into the lower time frames and see how price is playing around with it so you can flip on a dime if you need. Watch this video right here if you want to see more detailed information on the monthly close and the quarterly candle closing as a gravestone candle. Watch this video if you want to learn how to set up a chart just like mine. It'll also help you understand other Bitcoin analysts like myself if you just get through the video. If you're new to my channel, click the circle right here to subscribe. We'll see you later. You just got 𝘾𝙤𝙣𝙣𝙘 worldwide.